Hi guys. So now we get to the second topic that's of great interest in chapter 6, which is the idea of a binding price ceiling. So essentially, a price ceiling is when the government mandated or regulated price of a product is actually less than what the market equilibrium price should be. Now, effectively, that means that the market decided that, say, the price of a bottle of aspirin is $11, but the government decided that the price of a bottle of aspirin should be about $6. In that case, whoever's producing and selling aspirin will get an official price only of $6 per bottle, right? And this is exactly the kind of situation when there are binding price ceilings where we see the emergence of an interesting phenomenon called black markets. A black market is essentially a situation where the prevailing price of the good on the black market is actually greater than the official price of the good. Why is that happening? We'll see that in a second. So essentially, let's go to our simple supply demand diagram for, say, bread. And in this supply demand diagram, we see that the equilibrium market decided that the equilibrium price of bread should be about $1 per loaf, but the government decided that the price of bread should be about 50 cents per loaf. Maybe they want to encourage poor people to eat more, etc. Now, think about how you would react if you were buying bread. You're really happy. You increase your demand for bread because now it is cheaper than what it should be. But if you are the baker, you're kind of in trouble, and so you reduce the supply of bread than what you used to do in the free market. Now, in this case, we have what's called an excess demand or a shortage. Now, there are several things that could potentially happen when there's such an extreme shortage of an important essential commodity like bread. One thing might be that you're a very honest, baker, and you choose to sell QS units of or QS number of loaves of bread at 50 cents each. But the thing is that in the back door of your bakery, you have a line of people forming saying, hey, I can give you 75 cents for bread. I can give you $1 per loaf of bread. I can give you $1.50, and I can give you $2 for a loaf of bread, right? At a restricted quantity of QS, the maximum willingness to pay that consumers have is $2. Now, this essentially is what creates the black market. No matter how honest you are, the profit incentive is too much for you, and you are going to choose to sell loaves of bread at $2 at the back door of your bakery. Right now, you may get caught by the authorities. You may get a fine. You may be put in jail. So there are these other penalties that you probably want to think about. But just in terms of profit, the difference between the $2 price and the 50 cents official price is just too high. And you're going to sell most of your bread in the black market, that is in the back of your bakery. Just to keep up appearances, you may sell some of these loaves of bread at the regulation price or the ceiling price of 50 cents. So essentially, what happened is that because the ceiling that was imposed by the government was lower than the equilibrium price, there was a huge shortage of bread because supply was cut back drastically and demand increased drastically. When there is a shortage, then you have the possibility of black markets emerging, essentially. So this is unfortunately that is what has been the case. With Venezuela. There's a massive humanitarian and economic crisis that has been happening for quite a few years. The two of the four articles that I listed at the top of this set of slides basically reference Venezuela, and I think you should go ahead and read them. The government nationalized quite a few sort of private industries. On top of that, whatever industry or sector was left private, very rigorous price ceilings were imposed. Now, because of that, producers and farmers and producers are not able to make profits. A lot of the honest ones basically just close down production and they leave the industry. The ones that are there are basically selling their product in the black market under fear of being dragged off to jail at any minute. What has happened to consumers? The consumers essentially are getting clobbered on both ends. They have to pay the black market price for essential commodities, which is much higher than what the market equilibrium price would have been, and they get very restricted quantities of products as well. And in fact, there are reports of a mass scale malnutrition and almost starvation in Venezuela as a result. Now, where can we see this in America? Well, the most common example of a price ceiling is that of rent-controlled apartments. That hence my sort of very dated reference to Friends, the sitcom, where Monica, despite being a really poor chef, who was unemployed for quite a few years as well, lives in a really massive apartment because it's a rent controlled apartment that was leased to her grandmother. And her grandmother obviously passed on, and Monica is kind of illegally living in this apartment now. If so what happens in terms of rent controlled apartments in New York is that you can illegally sublease them to somebody else, and of course you would charge a much higher rent for this sublease than what you pay to the actual landlord, if you are the lucky one who was able to get a rent controlled apartment. Um, so um, the, um, now there are some other interesting effects of a price ceiling as well. So again, going back to the case of a baker in Venezuela, you are supposed to charge only 50 cents for a loaf of bread, but the cost of producing that loaf of bread stayed the same, so your profits get drastically lower. So do you kind of want to make your loaves a little smaller, just kind of just reduce the size of the loaf? Absolutely. Do you want to use lower quality flour and less butter and less eggs in your bread? Yes. So basically, your idea here is that you're reducing the quality of your product, and you're also reducing the quantity, the per unit quantity of the product that you are selling, right? And so all of these effects have been observed in the real world situation in Venezuela. Um, the other thing is what would happen in the long run, which is basically the situation that is now playing out, which is where that you as a baker or a farmer, or whichever industry has been subjected to price controls, you decide that you don't want to produce this product anymore. You sell off your bakery and move your capital to some other industry, or basically move to another country where there are no price controls. And so this sums up our discussion of Chapter 6 and interesting issues like minimum wage and black markets. I sincerely hope that at least some of you managed to read at least some of these readings. I think you'll find that these are it's a very immediate way in which you can apply principles of microeconomics to the real world. Bye, guys. See you in class soon.